What up, though? Welcome to the Featherweight MMA podcast, where we talk about everything combat sports, but mainly MMA. If you want to hear a couple regular MMA fans talk about MMA history, notable fighters, up and coming fighters, and everything in between, then this is the podcast for you. Now, I should warn you, we're not professionals, but we are big fans of combat sports. Now, if that sits good with you, grab a beverage, sit back, relax, and let's go. So, I'm DC, the host of this podcast. Today, we don't have my counterpart Locke on here, but we do have two special guests. First person we got on here, TJ,
What's up, everybody? I'm happy to be here.
and second person we got on here, Holiday.
What up, dog? I'm be the greatest fat boy MMA podcaster of all times.
We just starting, so I'm glad you're shooting for the moon. Okay, so fellas, the way I kick this off, I'm gonna talk a little bit about who we're talking about today, go over kind of the accolades and everything, and we're gonna open it up and talk about this person. So this is a part of the series Fallen Goats, and today we're gonna be talking about Jose Aldo. And of course, the Fallen Goat series is us talking about different people that were considered, in their prime in that conversation for the greatest fighter of all time, but in recent times may have fallen off, or you may be a new MMA fan at trying to find out why this person is so loved and revered. So, first thing I want to do is throw out kind of some of his accomplishments and accolades. His longest streak, he actually went on a 17 fight win streak. During that streak, he beat the likes of Cub Swanson, Mike Thomas Brown, not to be confused with Mike Brown, the 170 pounder, Uriah Faber, Manny Garbarian, Kenny Florian, Chad Mendez twice, Frankie Edgar, the Korean Zombie, and Ricardo Lamas. Also, he was the youngest featherweight champion in the WEC, and he was also the youngest champion in WEC history. While in the WEC, he got three knockout of the night bonuses. He also had the most consecutive wins in WEC history with eight. Once he got over to the UFC, for those that don't know, had bought the WEC, but they left him as their own division for a while and then rolled him in. So once he came over to the UFC, and in the UFC, he actually had three Fighter of the Year titles, three Fight Night bonuses, two Performances of the Night. He's had the most successful title defenses and the most consecutive title defenses in featherweight history. Now, in the UFC, he's regarded as having seven title defenses. But if we look at the fact that the WEC was rolled over into the UFC, he should actually be at nine, which would have him tied for fourth place with Georgia St. Pierre, right behind DJ with 11, who's tied with John Jones with 11, and Anderson Silva in the number three spot. So now that I've kind of went through some of, why he was regarded as a GOAT, why people loved him so much, I want to open it up so we can have a conversation around this. So I'm actually going to throw out a question first. So for those that don't know, I've been trying to get Holiday to watch MMA for a very long time, probably since about 2001 when I first started watching. And I think the first fight I was able to get him to watch was Tito Ortiz versus Ken Shamrock in 2002. And it was because he was a wrestling fan and knew who Ken Shamrock was. But Aldo seemed to be the person to really get him over into MMA. So I want to shoot a question out to him first as to kind of what made him, get into MMA. What was that thing about Aldo that kind of grabbed him? And then let's open up the floor and discuss Aldo as a potential GOAT and what happened.
Yeah, so for me, it was a couple things. I watched Ken Shamrock lose 3 times, so why would I want to do that? Because he had the ankle lock in wrestling. That's what I came here to see. And he lost to some guy with blonde hair and fire on his hat. So that was not appealing because Ken
Hey, them
Shamrock was
fire
busting
hats was
wind.
dope, man.
But
It's funny. I'm sorry. It's funny that you say he had that ankle lock, and then you realize, no, now knowing modern MMA, how impractical an ankle lock is in terms of high level fighting. Okay,
yeah,
go
what's
ahead.
funny is remember he had the armbar too, but it never took off in wrestling. And as we know, the armbar is actually real in MMA. But so it was like, okay, whatever. Then you would watch some stuff and there'd be a couple that would be cool, it's like whatever. And what I did like was the Tough with Forrest Griffin. I don't remember who else was on it, but I had watched that Tough. And that
Where he
got
was a
me,
coach or where he was competing?
he was competing.
Okay, so the very first Tough. Got it.
That was the first one?
The first
Yeah,
season.
Yeah.
yeah. I think you watched it a little late.
Gotcha.
I think you watched it because remember it was one of those things where I think you said I was texting you, and actually TJ was texting you the same time about the fight that was the finale, and I believe you went back and watched it after that.
Got you. But to get to your thing specifically, how I got to Aldo. So when I used to watch boxing, my favorite thing, what I fantasized about doing in a real street fight, was knocking somebody out with a body punch. If you punch somebody in the head, knock them out, cool. That's what you're supposed to do. But I always was so amused whenever people got knocked out by body shots. I thought that was so disrespectful. So that was like my thing in boxing. And then when it came to MMA, it was leg kicks. So I had kept talking about like leg kicks, and then he was like, "Well, Otto got the best leg kicks." So I tried to watch an Otto fight, and he did a kick and broke his foot on the first kick. So he didn't kick at all for the rest of the fight, but he still won the fight, and it was a really good fight. But then I went back and I watched the Uriah Faber fight, and he was helicoptering this guy with kicks. Like he just making him just like spin and spin and spin with kicks, and I was sold from there because they was like super quick soccer like kicks that just came from nowhere, and that was my new disrespect. And so that's what got me. That's what got me locked in. The fact that you could just beat somebody with leg kicks solely, and I was kind of hooked from there.
What about you, TJ? What kind of?
Uh,
Well,
I'm away for Mark to recover.
okay.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because, like, if I was to go back into my history of MMA as a fan, uh, I was big into anime growing up, right? So like I used to go, especially in high school. Once I started driving, let me say I got my license. Once I started driving in ninth grade, I used to go to like the little skate shops and the stores to buy the little, Dragon Ball Z and anime DVDs. So this was like early '99 or late '99 or early '99, whatever. And they would always have UFC, videotapes and shit on there, and they would have like the little Japanese imports. So I would buy like the games and watch buy the little cheap ass VHSs and watch the UFC ones and all that. So I was kind of like into MMA, but I didn't know what it was per se, right? So like
Hmm.
I wasn't one of them people like, I'm like, oh, should I watch this dude with a karate dude and the sumo guy, and like I would think, this shit was great. I loved it. But I wasn't able to decipher, if you could use the term, it from, WWE for WWF at the time, right? Like, because to me, it was just all spectacle that was fun. And I grew up watching boxing. So, similar to like Mark, if I was to say, like, when I became a diehard UFC fan, it really was that first season of Tough.
Hmm.
And, Ken Shamrock, we thought he was the baddest dude in the world. Tank Abbott, we thought he was the baddest dude in the world. And then that first season of Tough, which really I got into it because it came on right after the Monday Night Raw on, what was it, Spike TV or whatever it was called at the time. So that's kind of what made me fall in love with MMA as a whole. And then I started watching all the different shit, the Tachi Palace fights, the was it Bulldog, and then what was it called, WEC, right? And
Well,
so like when
Tachi
I
Palace actually became WEC, and then later on they came back. I don't know if they bought the name back or what, but yep.
So there you go. Like that's one of like again a really cool factoid about that shit, right? So I started watching WFC and just kind of was like, yo, I love this shit. And I remember like I watched I want to say, and I'm looking at the shirt dog list, so I'm kind of cheating a little bit here.
No, that's
But I want
good.
to
Sure
say,
dog, I reference that all the time.
I want to say it was his fight with a dude called Rolando Perez, right?
Hmm.
That I actually noted, like, started realizing who Jose Aldo was, and at that point, I think he was like mid card or opening the card or whatever. And Uriah Faber and Mike Brown were like the people, and there was
Yep.
another dude. I can't think of this kid's name, but he had a bowl haircut. I don't even.
Brian
This is
Bowles.
There you go. So
Yeah.
he had a bowl haircut. His name was Brian
Yeah.
Bowles. Love
Yeah.
it. I never put that shit together. But I remember I was watching him fighting this other, like, I want to say Brazilian dude, and he beat the shit out of this guy, right? Like, he just kneed the fuck out of him, just started beating him up, and the dude quit. And I'm like, yo, who is this crazy ass little dude, right? And then, of course, like, for a lot of people that love WC, the next big one was the Cub Swanson fight where the bell rang and this motherfucker kneed him. Like,
Yeah.
I know everybody loves the Jorge basketball knockout of Ben Askren.
Yeah.
But like, if you watch that, you're like, yeah, that was, I'm not gonna be a dick and say it was a fluke, but that was a fluke. Let's be honest with it. Ben was like not even paying attention, and again, we know the dude just got knocked out, whatever. But he wasn't paying attention. Jorge ran across and landed a lucky one. But if you watch the Jose Aldo Cub Swanson fight and you watch that knee, you actually see one of the craziest, like, I'm gonna use the term spatial awareness,
Hmm.
setups, and technique and overall execution you will ever see in MMA. Like, the only other comparative knee from an opening bell would be John Jones versus Shogun, right? In which he didn't run across it, he didn't try to catch him off guard. He literally came out, and then before you knew it, he put both feet off the ground. Cub was like, oh shit, his feet off the ground, and then he hit him with a tap knee first, and then knocked him out with the second. He was like a double knee, like pop pop, right? And I
Hmm.
remember at that moment, I was like, yo, I don't know who this dude is, but he's about to be the fucking champ. Like, it was just, I was in love with the dude. Not in love with him, pause, but like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, I love this dude's style. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The
And
big
then,
thing
like,
too. Go ahead.
but now I was just going to say, and then, of course, he fought Mike Brown after that, and then he ended up fighting Uriah Faber. I didn't watch the Uriah Faber fight live. I missed that one.
Hmm.
But I watched the aftermath and I watched like the last rounds of that fight. And I think when you go back in that, you realize that like he was fighting on a level that hadn't been reached in MMA. And when
Hmm.
you start talking about the greats, and don't let me get too far in this podcast, like if this is meant to be a later segment, but when you start talking about what makes a person a great and even to become a fallen legend, you always look at it as who changed the sport and adapted, like recreated the sport and made everybody else evolve.
Hold that,
And
because I will have a question toward the end of the podcast. So hold that.
So,
yeah,
hold
Let me
on,
touch on
before
what you. Go ahead.
you go ahead. If I want
No,
to,
go ahead.
what I was gonna say is on subject, but a little bit off subject of something that I think is so dope about you, UFC fighters as far as the physical fighters themselves versus every other sport, right? I would say my favorite sport is basketball, right? If you are beating somebody in basketball by 20 and it's like 10 seconds left and you dunk, they hate you, right? If you dunk and it's like 10 seconds left and you beating them by 20, they hate you. Everybody's going to be talking about it on Sports Center. They're going to be talking about it all week. But in MMA, I can beat you for 4 rounds, hit you with these leg kicks, which means you won't be able to walk tomorrow. Everybody know, including you, that I won. And I could keep leg kicking you all the way to the bell, knowing that you're not gonna be able to walk. And you already know that you lost, and I already know that I won. And keep leg kicking you all the way to the bell, and you're gonna shake my hand afterwards, and it's gonna be respect. But in basketball, if you dunk 20 years later, they still hate you. I just wanted to put that
Hey,
in there
for
real
one,
quick.
I'm trying to get that bonus money, and you understand it because you'd be trying to get that bonus too. But
by the way,
to what?
but like we know the basketball, the anti dunk rules and those things were implemented when the ABA integrated with the NBA.
Well, let
So
me
like
say this
those,
before you go down that basketball road, because I want to
I'm
keep it
not.
on topic, and I want to
All
say
right.
something off of what you said. So going back to that knee, so you mentioned something that I think a lot of people have to be aware of. That's the big difference between that knee and the Masvidal knee. The Masvidal knee was, I know that this man is going to come in and shoot. So I'm going to run to him, make him shoot, and throw a knee. Aldos was reacting in real time to what's happening unplanned. And it was very fast and swift. And Cub Swanson was more known as a striker. So it's not like he knew Cub was going to come in and try and grab him. And to your point, when he hit him with the knee, he raised the other knee and hit him with the second one before his first foot ever touched the ground. And at that point in time in MMA, that type of dynamic movement you just hadn't seen. And really, kind of before Mike Brown came to that featherweight division, you really didn't see KOs and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, Aldo came in and just started putting people away. And so I think those are factors that's kind of really big in who he was or that stature.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, 100%, and it goes back to the equivalent of the difference between an athlete and a fighter, right? And it's like when you realize that it's crazy to think about it now, but some of our all time greats in the last 2 decades have been athletes that have turned fighters, right?
Hmm.
And there are some people that get the athlete term with the reality they are fighters because by nature, but those sort of greats like a GSP, who to me is a fighter that turned into an athlete, not the other way around, but like
Hmm.
your John Jones, your Jose Aldos, your Ronda Rouseys, even to a certain extent Stipe. These are people that are athletes, high level athletes that became fighters. And when you have that sort of experience, when you know that Jose has a soccer background, right? He's used to that dynamic movement, that fast twitch, and I'm gonna keep using the term spatial awareness. Anytime you hear me talk about MMA, I'm gonna always talk about spatial awareness. I think that's what defines a champion level fighter versus a journeyman, is being able to assess real time information that is coming in, know where you are, know the distance, and know what's going to happen 3 steps ahead. Right, you just complete spatial awareness, and you look at that and you're like, not only was his fast twitch muscles, not to get too scientific, was so in tune that he was able to hit one, he was able to react. I'm not watching the video, but if I remember, the bell rung, Cub came in quickly to like crowd him with the like with his both his hands extended out, pantomime to his hands, and went for like I want to say either overhand or whatever, because I guess he just thought he could overwhelm him with size. And Jose jumped up off his feet, hit him with that first knee, and Cub sort of absorbed it. But before Cub could like move back or forth, that second knee was right there, and
Hmm.
it was almost like Cub tried to take that first knee and say, "I'm going to turn it into a takedown," but before he knew it, pop, he was out. Right, and it's reminiscent of the Jose Aldo Chad Mendez fight where similar to the same thing happened. Chad tried to react thinking he knew what was happening, and before he know it, Jose had already calculated everything and was like, "Cool, I'm gonna fire this off," right? And he
Hmm.
was out, and it was like at that moment, that wasn't for the belt, right? The Cub
That was
wasn't
a the Cub Swanson
was
fight
the number one
was two.
contender.
Yeah, it was the number one contender, and he fought Mike Brown right after that, I believe.
Got you. So if you think about that fight, it was like at that moment when he landed that, like we see it with Izzy, we see it nowadays a lot. But at that moment, I don't think anyone thought that Mike Brown was really gonna stand a chance, right? And that's not to disrespect Mike Brown, but everybody in their mom. And at that point, Mike Brown was like knocking people out left and right too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like he was
yeah.
good, but it was just like the wherewithal to do that at that point. And at that point, that was Cub when he was peaking. To
Hmm.
do that, it just established that this is a guy that's going to be a future great, probably for a long time coming, right? Yeah. Don't let me rant.
Yeah,
Cut me
Mark,
off.
what's your what you think? What's your favorite kind of Aldo fight, or maybe your favorite? Maybe not moment, since we talked about a couple moments, but either one of those.
Well, another one of my favorite fighters is Frankie Edgar.
Hmm.
So the Frankie Edgar trilogy, the third fight not so much because the third fight he just beat up Frankie. I didn't really appreciate that. Um, I don't want to get them confused now, but I'm almost positive the second fight is the one that I believe that Frankie actually won. Um, and that's the one I think would be my favorite fight actually. But it was not so because it wasn't that I think that Frankie won. and like I thought Frankie got robbed. I was okay with whoever they said won. I just thought that Frankie won, but I thought it was a really really good fight, and I liked about it a lot. So just so that everybody can know, I don't judge fights like, probably the official way to judge fights. I got my own criteria. And the reason why I felt like Frankie won is because I thought that Aldo won the first 2 rounds. I thought the third round was close, but I thought that Frankie won the third round. And I think Frankie clearly won the fourth and the fifth round. I always give, when I'm unsure, I always give the momentum to the person who's winning the latter end of the fight if they go the distance versus the
Mm-hmm.
front end of the fight, even though they should weigh the same. And if,
Bernard Hopkins rule.
yeah, that's my guy. That's my guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. Of
Uh,
course, you can lose the first 8 rounds and win the last 4 and win the
you
fight.
feel me? You see what I'm saying?
That's funny.
Get a couple
I would have
connections.
called out pride rules, but that makes sense too.
But I like that fight a lot because even though I thought that Frankie won the last couple rounds, Aldo was still really in there. I think Aldo is a smart fighter. Even though I don't think that he looks like a smart fighter when you watch him fight, but I think he's a really smart fighter when he fight because he does a lot of good counters and he kind of fills you out and see what's going on, and then he kind of do his game plan from there. And I think the problem is with him, period, is he's strong early and then he withers late, right? But even with him withering late, and even though I think that he lost that fight specifically, he still had enough of his mental to make the fight close enough to where obviously other people thought that he won, even though that he was fading late as far as how quick he was moving, how quick he was getting off his stuff. But he was very precise with his movements and the way he was kind of controlling the ring. And we all know Frankie like to he like a little fly, like to kite, just come at you, come at you, come at you, come at you, come at you. So I think my favorite auto fight would be that probably the second Frankie fight.
I want to throw something out to you, TJ. Knowing that, of course, one of the things that we talking about is the fallen goat. Although went on like a 3 fight losing streak, and now he is rebound with a win, but we know he's not the same Aldo. And both that
Two
45.
fight losing streak because that Marlon Moraes fight was a bullshit call. Sorry, go
I'm only
ahead.
I'm only
Go ahead.
going by the record,
Go
but
ahead.
and I think well, I think Peter is gonna come back and take the title back from
You think
Funkmaster,
so?
but I do. But
Okay.
let me throw the question out there to you. So you got either one of them, at 35, and then you got Volkanovski at 45. All young lions, all still getting better. Should Aldo retire? Like, what more can he really do in this sport?
So, although, if I'm going to be honest with you, I got to roll it back. There are two things. One, Aldo is in a peculiar situation where he can end up being a BJ Penn, right? In the sense of he can go out so bad that his entire legacy is affected, right? Like
Hmm.
Randy Couture got knocked out. People still talk about him being an all-time great, right?
Hmm.
Like because he was able to walk away without embarrassing himself. Whereas BJ
Hmm.
Penn stuck around so long that I would never be able to qualify him as a legend because his actual bad years outweighed his good years, right?
Hmm.
And that's a hard thing to consider. If I'm gonna be like again, scientific about this, we're auto fucked up and we're a lot. Can we
I
cuss
just
on
want to
here?
say I'm glad Locke not on this podcast. He would fight you talking about BJ Penn.
Hey
But go
man,
ahead.
what's the other dude in the Facebook group, Hawaiian, whatever his guy is, who like anytime you mention something wrong about a Hawaiian or Samoan, he gets upset. I'm like that dude. I'm like he digs ditches for a living. He might put somebody in there one day. No, but like let's talk about this though, right? Like, and it's an issue that a lot of really great fighters have, where they don't understand the science of it. As you age, you should never go backwards. You should go up in weight, right?
Hmm.
Like you should never try to take away from who you are physically as you get older because you diminish yourself beyond just weight cutting. And where Aldo
Plus, the
fucked up,
power is the last thing to leave. Speed leaves
the
first, and when you go lower, you going
exactly.
with faster dudes.
Exactly. So, and in a certain case, when you, especially at a certain weight level, your power is great, but your power will actually diminish as you go lower in weight with your speed because it's not like you're just stationary mass, right? Like Derek Lewis can get his ass whooped for 5 rounds, but he's still 260 pounds of mass. So if
Right.
he can land that 260 pounds, you gonna knock somebody the fuck out, right?
Right.
Like, because he knows how to throw that punch. So he could be exhausted, dead tired, with no energy, and still be able to throw his body weight. But whereas if you're 135 pounds, if you dead toss it, dead tired and exhausted, you throw that body weight, that person on the other side might be able to absorb that a lot better in round 5 than he could in round 1. And where Aldo fucked up is, if you guys remember, prior to the McGregor fight, there was talks of Aldo going up, and that's when the Frankie fight conversation started happening, right? Aldo could go up, be the first, 2 division champion. Aldo's gonna move up. Aldo was talking shit about fighting GSP, and like you watch the Aldo Mark Hominick fight, that man came in looking like a welterweight that cut down to a lightweight fighting, what's his name, Mark Hominick, right? And that was his first time we saw his skill slipping. He put on a lot of mass really quickly. Not going into the whole USADA shit, just gonna straight keep it simple what we saw. And he had a scramble, he had to dig deep, and he had to dig in to win that fight. The next fight back, he came in normal size Aldo, and he went back to dominating. And then he fought Max Holloway, which is funny because people say, "What's your favorite Aldo fight?" To me, it's his Max Holloway fights because in
Them
those
tough fights
fights,
to watch, man.
they are. But the reason why I like those fights because it wasn't that Aldo slipped or lost anything. He literally just fought somebody that just came out the gate better, right? Like if you watch those fights, it was the classic Aldo who fought somebody who grew up watching the classic Aldo, right? It's like it's that old theory, like you could be a legend to a certain point, but eventually you're gonna fight the people that grew up watching you. You're gonna be Kobe playing against Michael Jordan, right?
It's the
Like
changing of the
it's
guard.
it's how it happens, and that's what that was. But in my mind, instead of Aldo jumping backwards, he should have moved on and moved up in the division because I still think the things that made Aldo great was his timing, his speed, and his takedown defense, and again his spatial awareness. And I'm like, he could have went up at 155 at a point where the division and the title was in a weird place and could have won. I still think Aldo could have beat Benson Henderson, right? I just think he had that ability. But he waited and he went down and he diminished himself. And that's what put him on that sort of skid. And you look at the people he lost to, he had the fight with Jeremy Stevens. Jeremy Stevens is a journeyman. He was never going to win that fight. He had the fight with the other dude. I can't remember his name. But
Jan.
I think that was like no, it was
Jan was ended up being the champ.
he had another fight with a dude that I want to say before he made the commitment to jump down. It was like a up and coming dude he beat, and then he lost to the current champ, which was a close ass fight, right? It was a close fight. He lost that belt, and then he went down to fight Marlon Moraes. He beat the shit out of Marlon Moraes and got tired in the last round, which, in my opinion, was again one of the issues with cutting so much weight and not being comfortable down there. He didn't have that power. He didn't have the speed. Marlon was landing
So
shit
you
on him.
saying no retire, go back to 45 and get the belt? That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, thank you for not letting me. Thank you for not letting me go on a rant. But yeah, like honestly, to me, it's like don't keep chasing that 135. Go back up to 145, or go away for a couple of months and come out at 155. Get 1 or 2 wins, and then let it go. Go home, right? Like without a Khabib at the top of 155, Jose could make a run for that belt, right? Because he will get the legendary status.
Man, that's a bold statement.
He has the legendary status to bypass a lot of people that would give him trouble. You know what I'm saying? Like Khabib's cousin is probably going to be the top of that food chain pretty soon here. But right now, if Jose Aldo came out, it was just like, yo, I got my mask back. I'm coming at 155. Fuck you, Conor. I want my rematch. I'm not saying you ducked, but you ducked originally. They're going to give him that fight. You know what I'm saying? If he comes out and calls out, if Jose Aldo came out and called out Justin Gaethje and it became a battle of the leg kicks, everybody's going to watch that. And just like that, he can be right back in the title picture.
Gaethje's a big boy for him, man.
That's fine. But at 135, I think he's going to get embarrassed again, and it's it.
Yeah, I
Go ahead,
think he
Holiday.
need to go ahead and retire. And I'm gonna tell you why I think he need to retire. Two reasons. Let's go back to that Max Holloway fight, right? You said it was a good fight. The first time he got punched in the Max Holloway fight, he looked like the Jamie Foxx skit when Jamie Foxx got hit and he had to realize where he was and try to get his back. And that was like the first time he got punched. And I feel like that's about how he is in a lot of these fights. When he really get tagged, he looked like he go blank for a while. And to your point, I think that two things. I think that he had uh, really quick twitch muscles, and he had good counters and timing, right? Whereas in now, I don't think it is as good. So I have rewatched the Yan fight. You know, that was the fight for the belt, right? And
Yep.
that was another one of those fights that was actually a good fight. I thought that it was tied going into the fifth. It was 2-2. And then, you know, he just got murdered in the fifth. It was like he didn't even pinch him. But even before that, it was like Yana, or however you pronounce his name, he'd throw some strikes. And Aldo would be in perfect position to strike, but wouldn't strike. And then he would reset and then throw some set of strikes. Whereas in the past, if he's in that same position, he gonna hit you a couple times. And specifically, he gonna hit you in that body with that left hook and then come to the top. He's really good with that combo and then throwing in the kicks in there. Now, in my opinion, it seemed like he has to think about everything. Whereas in before, obviously I believe he thought about it before, but I felt like it was like thought about it is because he's smart in the moment, it's a reaction. Where now it's like I think he'd be like, oh shit, I was supposed to punch right there. Oh shit, I could have kicked him right there, but now it's too late. And the people get younger and younger, and you get older, and then to your point, uh when people grow up watching people fight, and like his last couple fights, if you remember, people be like, you know, I loved Aldo, this, that, and third, but today I gotta fuck him up. You know what I'm saying? And when people loved you before, it's an extra notch on their belt when they come to fuck you up. And I think that once you get so old, the only thing that's gonna happen is, to your point, your legacy gets more and more diminished, and nothing you would do would actually give you extra on your legacy. If he had a title run, yeah, that would. But I don't think that. I think that once you hit a certain spot, you can't get a. I mean, you can get a title run, so you can technically get a title run, but I don't think you would string enough wins together and keep your brain cells to actually have a title run. And then if you had a title, you would have to do the Cejudo and retire as soon as you get the title, because you definitely have to go on no defending streak.
Let me ask y'all
If
this
you ever
question.
hear the story of why Cejudo retired, you would understand how ridiculous he is as a human being. But go ahead,
First of
sorry.
all, Cejudo is a legend, Triple C, baby. But let
I
me
feel like
ask
you
y'all
could do
this
an
question.
episode on him.
So, in the featherweight division, there's two different guys that's arguably considered the greatest featherweight. You have Aldo and you have Max Holloway. Based on title defenses and all of that stuff, if we look at the numbers, Aldo would appear to be the better featherweight. However, he lost to Max Holloway twice by stoppage. Is it possible for you to be considered better than somebody you lost to twice by stoppage? And who do you all think would rank higher kind of on that featherweight scale?
So sorry, not again. Don't let me rant here. I think I think in terms of featherweight, Holloway is probably the best featherweight we've ever had. And and it's arguably, you know, like, I'm biased because I'm a big fan of him as a human being first, foremost, before he's a fighter. But I also think easily one of the better ones we ever had. And it's hard to say that out loud because you realize that, like, he might not have the record that Aldo had at featherweight. I just think that he's had the better competition and the better runs and all that. But I also don't think just because who you lost to diminishes who you are and who you better than or not better than, right? Like, I would say Dustin Poirier is a better light heavyweight than Conor McGregor, but they're 1-1. You know what I'm saying?
Lightweight.
Lightweight, sorry, lightweight.
Yeah.
And there are those type of conversations that I always kind of look up to. Like, we know people hate John Jones so much that the minute he loses, people are gonna try to throw away his entire career. But John Jones could get brutally knocked out by Francis Ngannou and still be the better fighter of the two, right? Like, it's a matter of when did
Yes.
you meet that person, what was your career like leading up to that fight, where was that person's career trajectory, and what happens after that. And so, if Jose Aldo retired today, I wouldn't be mad if people ranked him above Max Holloway, even though he lost twice. But I would still say, personal bias, Max Holloway is the greatest featherweight of all time.
Yeah,
I,
that's some good points. What you think, Holiday?
I think that I think that it is hard to have you lose to somebody twice who's also has a great run and you be above them unless you literally fought them at the complete end of their rope, right? The problem is, I do think that Aldo's at the end of his rope, so it still counts, but he's not at the like complete end where you looking like what? He don't look like how Ben Askren just looked in this goddamn fight. He's just all fat and sloppy. You know what I'm saying? Where
Listen,
you
man,
like, oh,
that
you
shit
know,
don't count. This man was 8 months removed from having his entire hip replaced. That was just
Wait,
stupid. Go
wait,
ahead.
in
listen,
all the photos of him standing straight, I don't know if you all noticed it, but literally one of his shoulders is like 3 inches lower than the other one. It's
Yes,
crazy.
because he just had his entire hip replaced. Some of the legs aren't even the same height
I was
anymore.
still going for Ben, man. That's my guy.
yeah.
But
But
anyway,
so when you look fat and sloppy like that, then you'll
That's
get
sloppy. What's the
you'll
name of this
get
podcast again?
the Fat Boy MMA podcast.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
uh
Good
you get more
holiday.
leeway. But when you actually are still relatively active, it's harder. Now, I actually agree that to me, it's not like they fought Prime and Prime, but the problem with Primes is generally if there's going to be somebody better than somebody, you're never going to see them at their prime, right? Because that's just generally the way it goes. Like how Kobe said he wished he would have played at the same time as Mike. It's impossible, right? Obviously, he played against Mike, but he didn't get to play against Mike's Mike. And that's kind of how it is also with fighting. So that's always a part of it. So then once you lose twice, I think it's going to be hard, especially because Max still had. First off, Max got cheated. I'm gonna say that because he now in the last fight, obviously he won because he beat the shit out of him and was
I
talking
still think
DC
he
on the
won both of
side.
those fights, but go ahead.
Yeah, agree. That's what I was about to say. He got cheated. So if I take the fact that he got cheated, his if I take into the fact that he got cheated, I feel like he won those fights as well. And so he still has a good run to go on as long as the UFC don't box him out. Um, but he and he had a really good run and he beat Otto twice. So I would put him above Aldo. I would definitely put him above Aldo because he beat him twice and he beat him convincingly twice. It wasn't like no 5 round war and it was like who won this thing. He clearly won it, and Aldo is still good enough to be fighting, even though I think he should retire. And Max has an impressive run his own, and I believe that he won the fights that they said he lost, and he got he got more fights coming down the pack. And then that last performance was just so crazy. I was actually afraid that he's gonna get knocked out because he's talking so much shit while he's punching this nigga in the head. I mean, this guy in the head.
Oh man,
So
Booker T.
yeah.
But
he fought a
yeah,
Booker T.
nah, yeah, I definitely I did both point of views. For me, one of the reasons why I asked the question is because it's hard to gauge because I literally feel exactly the same way that both of you all do. So it's like, it's one of those tug of war things. But a series of questions I want to throw out there. Part of what I would like to do is kind of define some rules for this podcast for different topics. Um, and there's three topics in particular that I think confuse people. And you can throw this out there as a question, and you'll have different people that's actually talking about one of these three things, but they're all thinking that they're talking on the same subject. And that the topic is, who is the GOAT, or in this case, we would be defining what is the GOAT? What is the greatest of all time, right? Is there a category where there's GOATs, but then you have one that's just at the top of the heap, right? So where you would use a phrase like, "Oh, that's one of the GOATs," and then the next one would be pound for pound, right? So I want to kind of get you all's opinion, because I want to end up forming something that's going to be unified. Whereas when we're talking on this podcast and we say the GOAT, or we say one of the GOATs, or we say pound for pound, it's literally these rules, this category. Does this person fit into this category? So I'm going to shoot that over to you first, TJ.
So if I'm hearing that right, it's essentially what defines a goat, and then what do we credit? What's the criteria for a list of goats? Is that kind of
Yeah,
what you're
so
saying?
kind of like a lot of times we talk about even the nature of this whole segment of fallen goats, right? I put an
Hmm.
S on it because at any given time you have multiple people kind of regarded in the conversation of the GOAT, but it's hard to be one. But then usually those conversations, no, this is the GOAT, but then this person might be however many down the list. So defining what is the GOAT, what are GOATs, and then what's pound for pound.
Got you. What to me what makes it the goat is whose skill set, creativity, ingenuity, and ability you can put in any division, in any weight class, against any person. Scale it up or down as you see fit. Like, assume you're a creative player, you have to scale it up and down, right? And they would still be just as dominant. But not only that, but who would be as dominant in any era of MMA, right? Like, when I look at an Ali, I say Ali's skill set, intelligence, pound for pound, everything he did, he would be dominant in just about any era of boxing we've seen to date, right? And
Hmm.
and and even like spent like, I mean, come on, like, I'm not let's not fucking be brand new here. But Muhammad Ali at his best would dominate the current heavy crop of heavyweights, right? And that's sad to say because you're supposed to escalate and get better and better over time, right? Um, and to me, that's what creates the goat. And I think you really only have maybe two or three candidates in that field, maybe four. Um, do should I name them?
Go ahead, shoot them
Okay,
off.
so I mean, you really only have four candidates, maybe five, and it's really John Jones, Demetrius Johnson, George St. Pierre, and at this point, Khabib number blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And if we're gonna define it, we're gonna say Demetrius Johnson is a guy whose ability and creativity with his size. Whereas it's like, if you could put a heavyweight with a Demetrius Johnson's ability and creativity, he would be a dominant heavyweight, right? So on and so forth. But you can't ever say Demetrius Johnson is the greatest GOAT because he took his skill set up a weight class twice and got dominated, right? So that's what kind of takes him out of that conversation. You look at George St. Pierre across multiple fields and multiple generations, and you realize George St. Pierre is what I call a learned GOAT, right? Like, he came in as this product and then got better over time. And every time he got beat, he came back that much better, right? And then Khabib, until people understand the difference between wrestling and that style of wrestling that he does, it's not even
Mauling,
sambo,
bear mauling.
bear mauling, right?
Yeah,
And
that's,
it's
that's
funny because Chael Sonnen put it best. He says the problem is no one has realized that what Khabib does is he takes you down against the cage. No one has
Mhm.
realized that the only reason he is able to do what he does so great is, one, having the cage there, but also the fact that people don't understand that aspect of it. And it's like, and this is gonna sound crazy to say, but if you watch his fights with Connor, when Connor stayed off the cage, he actually was there. He just was so scared of getting taken down that he wasn't able to be Connor in those moments. Now that leaves you with one other person, which is John Jones. Like, we've seen John Jones show up drunk in a fight and beat and win. We've seen John Jones get dominated and say, you know what, fuck this, and win. We've seen John Jones rely on his intelligence in a fight, not his body because he was physically falling behind, but his mindset, his ability to adapt in the situation and win. And we are actually having real life conversations about John Jones beating a dude that literally could should in all worlds and aspects take his head off at any given moment. And we're like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but he probably can't do that. You know what I'm saying? And it's like when you talk about who the legend, who the GOAT is, it's that. And it's who has that level of skills that Jones has, which is physical ability, mental ability, and then just overall intelligence to understand spatial awareness, intelligence, dictate a fight, and adaptability within a fight. And it really comes down to John Jones, maybe GSP, right? So, and when I talk about what makes you a GOAT, the GOAT, it's that. In terms of what gets you on that list and level, it really is just like, what's your body of work? Jose Aldo's body of work is everything he's done up to the point he diminished his skill set. Had BJ Penn retired when he should have retired, you probably would be talking about him as a GOAT. But when you go on, as long as you do, to the point where we answer all the questions that go unanswered when a person retires reasonably early, he kind of eliminates himself from it.
Yeah,
So is
so
that
my
why Anderson Silva
biasness.
not on your list?
So you just
Um,
took my whole thing I was about to say. But go ahead.
The only
I
reason,
told you I'm
like,
gonna be
look, the only reason
debating.
Anderson Silva is not on my list, and it's not like he's still a GOAT to me, but he's not the GOAT, is because Anderson Silva's one weakness was always there from the beginning, and it was glaring. No one took advantage of it. He had a couple of favorable matchups, no one took advantage of it. The people that did, like, kind of start to get there, they had other shit, right? Like Travis Luter fucking had the whole weight cut issues and all the other bullshit. Patrick Cote blew his fucking knee out. And those were the people that gave Anderson Silva trouble early on. Walking into the Chris Weidman fight with Anderson Silva, I remember everybody was like, Anderson's gonna knock him out. It's gonna be the easiest shit ever. And I was like, nah, Anderson's gonna be. I remember I was having this conversation, I think, with my boy Corey, and I was
But
like,
that fight was going good for Anderson. You can't act
it
like
was, it
that fight was
was,
going
and
really good for him.
it was if you're an Anderson Silva fan. It wasn't if you were just watching it from what it was. And what it was Anderson was trying to pull Weidman into his tricks and his games, which is get you fucked up, you chase after me, and I knock you the fuck out, right? And Weidman wasn't falling for it. And one of the things that was really interesting about that fight, and it goes back to the Chael fight, is Anderson, if you watch that fight, he was so worried about Weidman closing the distance because he wanted nothing to do with his grappling. And when you realize that, you realize that's how he fucked himself up. He was trying so hard to not get engaged and clinch up, which in my personal opinion, if he'd have just pulled a fucking tie clinch, he would have got Weidman out of there quick and early. But he was so nervous about that wrestling aspect that he was like, every time they got close, he started backing out quick, playing silly games, backing out quick. And when once Weidman caught on, like, yo, he just doesn't want me to get close to him. All I got to do is just keep going at him until he has nowhere to run, and then he knocked him out. The second fight is bullshit. I don't count that fight. I'm like, Weidman. I checked the kick. I knew I was gonna do that. Shut the fuck up, bro. Like,
Hey
Well,
shut.
man,
I
let
don't
me
like
say
people.
he
this.
Shut up.
practiced that
Let me say
shit.
this though. Hold on, Holiday. Let
Good.
me say this. So I see your point, but one of the reasons why, well, let me say this. One of the reasons why I can believe that they practiced that checking the kick with the knee was because no, Anderson was tearing his leg up that first fight. He was tearing
Yeah.
his leg up, so they were prepared for that. So I can believe during that fight, Anderson Silva's most success was on those leg kicks. And other than that,
Fair.
he was doing what Anderson does, which is trying to get you to overcommit on something so I can counterpunch. And of course, we know that's why he started clowning, which of course led to, him getting KO'd in the first one. But I think that's a great factor in leading into the second fight and landing that. Now, if you did practice that and do that on purpose, that's pretty whack because and if you listen to his story, he said Longo had said, I guess many, many moons ago, he did in a kickboxing fight or something and broke a guy's leg. So at that point in time, you're trying to break his leg. And to me, that's kind of dirty because that's not a shin on shin, you know what I mean, leg kick. But before we get too far away from it, I still need Holiday to. I want to get his opinion on the GOAT, goats, pound for pound, all of that type stuff.
All right, so mine is not going to be as in detail or as elaborate as TJ's. To me, the GOAT comes down to this. Do I think that anybody can beat you at your best ever? That's how I define the GOAT. So, meaning if everything is equal, so my GOAT is John Jones. All right. Do I think that if John Jones and Anderson Silva, who was my previous GOAT, was the same size, same era, both in their prime, who I think will win? And go down the line. That's how I determine the GOAT. Basically, no matter the era, they put y'all in a situation. If we just maxed y'all skills out at peak, so both of y'all are at peak, who do I think will win? That's basically how I define the GOAT. How I have the subcategory of GOATs is people that teeter that line, but at the end of the day, I don't think they will beat that person, right? So, wait, let me rewind. For me, title defenses also plays a role. Not just winning a title or not beating a bunch of people, specifically title defenses. Because I believe that title defenses in any sport, but specifically MMA, is the hardest thing to do, which is why I don't give Connor any championship credit. I literally give him, in my brain, he's Kevin Durant. He has no titles. Okay. Because we know he won a title, but to win a title is one thing. To continuously defend that title is a whole nother thing. Because to TJ's point earlier about something else, when you're the champion, everybody is preparing for you. That thing is so much more harder. You fighting this person, your opponent, you're just fighting that opponent. This opponent has been fighting you all this time if you're a lone reigning champ because you're the one that's always at the top. So even when they fighting somebody else, they're preparing for you. You as the champ is only preparing for the next opponent that's in front of you. So title defenses is a lot to me, which is why Khabib is not in my GOAT list. And if he stay retired, he won't be in my GOAT list. He don't have enough title defenses for me. Pound for pound, I used to, because of Marcus, I really wish I would have saved this clip because I used to want to use this against Marcus like every single time he opens his mouth, but I could never find a clip. I tried on YouTube
Shots
to
fired.
find it so many times. And DJ was being interviewed, and they said they was talking about him basically not being a pound for pound. And what he said was, and he named people, so I wish I could find the actual interview. Do you really think that, and he named the actual person, is better than John Dotson skill for skill? And I'm like, no, they're not. They do not have the same skill that John Dotson have. But because they're smaller, you kind of dismiss them more. But like if you're talking actual skill, DJ fought people with a lot of skill. But because he was so much better than them, he didn't get him a chance to be champ. They don't get the credit or reserve. And then because people don't give super small people credit, but their skill. So my pound for pound is more so about like that actual skill set and what you can do with that skill set.
Yeah, no, I dig that. Once again, I think a lot of my stuff is kind of in between what you all have. Um, the biggest thing that I will throw in that kind of wasn't mentioned for me, your runs mean something, and not just who you beat, how you beat people, and how you change a dynamic. Right? When you literally have people that change an entire sport, it's hard for them not to go on my GOAT list. And I put Anderson Silva out there. Although, of course, we were talking about just how dynamic, how fast, everything that he was doing. Anderson Silva literally did so many things nobody had seen before. And his title defenses, as we know, would actually be higher, but he would do things like last minute, hey, somebody fell out of fight. You want to, we need somebody for 205. And he just texts Dana, hey, I'll go fight, on 2 weeks' notice at a weight class up. Right now, granted, he wasn't fighting a champ, but these were much bigger guys, big threat, everything like that. Um, so those things mean something. With GSP, a big knock on him for me is I get it. He knew it was a bunch of PED in the sports, but there's always been PED in the sports. When he got beat up and down and across the octagon by Johnny Hendricks and looked like he got hit by a Big Mac truck and literally retired for like 5 years, that to me was like that said something, right? And
Mhm.
then when he came back, he really picked his opponent, right? And he picked a guy that he had trained with, that he knew had some eye problems. He wasn't the fastest guy, just that whole dynamic kind of puts it doesn't allow me to put him in a category of somebody like a John Jones, right? So so when I'm looking at these people, I look at what you all said about kind of, you know, if I take this same skill set and I put it in a different weight class. I also look at if both of these people were in their prime, which is very important, who would win. And I also look at, like I said, what else has this person done? Has this person changed anything? Anderson Silva with the, infamous, all going down in history front kick to the face of Vitor Belfort, who, I mean, was a super threat at that time. I mean, the same guy that, almost a couple years later, still almost beat JBJ for his first real, loss in the sport. And for him to just front kick him like that, bah, get him out of there. I mean, it was just spectacular. So I think kind of all of those goes into it. But when I look at every single category, and this goes into what you were saying, TJ, the only person that kind of checks all the boxes for me to say is the GOAT right now, doesn't matter the era, doesn't matter the weight size, title defenses, you name it, is JBJ, John Bones Jones. So it becomes hard to rank everybody else though because they shift, especially like you said, your Anderson Silvers, your BJs, your Aldos, these guys that keep fighting, where it becomes harder and harder to argue to say how good they are because they've fallen so far. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that the end of your run is so important. And another thing that Locke and the other dude always get on me about in the group is I always be saying everybody should retire. And they be like, no, let them die. But I think that when your run at the end is horrible, it diminishes your legacy even for people who watch your legacy from the beginning. Because it becomes harder and harder to erase those things and then it go. And it's like, my guy Tyrone Woodley. I really wish he would retire because it's like it
Yes.
almost don't even feel like he had a dominant run. How bad his fall off. Like he literally fell off like an NFL running back. He went from
Yeah.
he just it wasn't something going on in that fight. To know that's every fight now. And
Hmm.
stuff like that ruins it. I think that DC kind of ruined his legacy. Okay. I think that DC kind of ruined his legacy. Um, with like his last fights and stuff like that. To, to whereas and when you lose and when you lose certain ways going towards the end, it kind of diminish everything that you got going. So, my thing with the with JBJ is, and I've said this separately to TJ is, I'm afraid for him to actually get knocked out. If he was to actually come up here and win this belt, I would actually hope he would just win the belt and retire and submit his legacy. Because I think if he was to get knocked out, first off, at heavyweight, if he was to get knocked out, that should just be crazy. And then I think that if he was to start going and start fighting and fighting, he gonna lose. And then people already thought he lost the last fight, and now people would just start picking apart everything. Well, if you really look at it, since he ain't really dominated no fight since he was the young guy and he threw Machito on the ground. And it's like, yeah, but he had 40 fights after that and he won all of them. But anyway.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
got one. Go ahead, TJ, if you were about to say
No,
something. Then I
I,
got one last
I,
question for
I
you
was just
fellas.
gonna say that that is again my biggest worry is the fact that if he get because people hate him so much that any loss people are going to amplify it. Like, I still don't think he lost his last fight, but because people hate him, they keep saying he lost. Now,
It
I
was
also
close.
add that it was close. It was one of his worst performances. But I'll also add that I am not as worried about Jones going down the BJ Penn route, and I hate that we use him as an example because we've seen Jones choose to sit out essentially 2 years because he was bored with fighting, two, he didn't like the pay, and three, he doesn't care. I think he's one of those guys who's a sociopath that he doesn't care about your opinion about him so much so that he can lose a close fight and not need to get that back to prove a point. He's just like, whatever, it is what it is, moving on, right? That's so yeah, that's it.
First of all, John Jones is in the mountains of Albuquerque, dressed as a Marine with a dog and automatic weapons. So, but one last fight. I mean, one last question for you fellas. So, of course, us talking about Aldo for this particular podcast. If you could have one last fight for him to say, "Hey, you know what? I want you to go ahead and retire, hang him up." Who do you think should be his very last retirement fight, and how you see that the outcome of that fight?
Can I go first?
Go ahead, shoot.
All right. I really think that his last retirement fight should be somebody else's last retirement fight. I think him and Frankie Aldo should fight if they both choose to stay at 135, and it should be both of them just signing off.
Who did he say?
Both the Holidays guys, Frankie Edgar.
I think they should fight each other, and they should both win, lose, or draw. They sign off. I think that's not only is going to be a beautiful fight to watch on screen, it may be Frankie's one chance to get that win back. And I think they both are in the exact same position, and they should fight it and leave and be done.
I'm mad that he said that because it's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say it should be the retirement fight. Am I here? Because y'all froze.
And that's it.
Did I go? Did I get cut out?
Yeah, you must have cut out. Yeah, what you said. The part I heard you say was you was gonna say the same thing, and then it's kind of not much after that. I wasn't sure. It looked like you froze up a bit.
All right. Yeah. What I said was I'm mad that he said that because I was going to say the same thing. He said it should be the retirement fight, and win, lose, or draw, they both should retire. The crazy part is I think Aldo will win again. I think he just has Frankie's number. Especially that the third fight, it really wasn't close. Like Frankie couldn't even get in on him. He was just picking Frankie apart from the outside. But Frankie being Frankie, I think it'd still be a good fight. I don't think he need to fight nobody young, and he don't need to be giving the keys to somebody who won't just knock his head off. Him and Frankie had a last fight. They both retire, and they had drinks to talk about how they mess each other up, like on some rockin' chair stuff.
Hey, I like it. I like it. Um, for me, I'll roll with that. The thing that would make me want to see that fight is just because one, we know they fought twice. I believe they're 1-1. Or no,
Nope.
did
Jose won both
Jose? Okay.
pretty convincingly.
Got you. And I know for a while when Frankie was at 55, which he was really undersized for and shouldn't be there, the call was always for those two guys to fight. So, I would love to see that one. And like you said, both of those guys retire. I like both of them. And the funny thing is, the first time I heard of Frankie, believe it or not, was not him fighting in the UFC. It was him on MTV going to fight in the UFC, and it was one of those. You know how MTV used to do those crazy "I want to be a fighter" or this, that, and the other. I think it was like following a fighter or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like his first, maybe second fight in the UFC, and I didn't know who he was, and I watched him on MTV first, and then became a fan. Crazy. So, well, fellas, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Wanted to throw it to y'all to say any kind of last things you want to say about the podcast, about Frankie Edgar, any up and coming people you would like to, see in this category, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, man. I would love to understand what's the criteria for a fallen legend, because I feel like I'm not going to agree with y'all criteria for a fallen legend, so I want to be a part of it, and I definitely want to be a part of some of the names that you've thrown out there in the past, and I want to be a part of the Ronda Rousey episode because I have a personal feelings about her in terms of why she's forever a legend, regardless of her two loss. But that's a whole nother 2 hour conversation. And beyond that, yo, this was fun, and I think you both made really great points.
Well, you already know I'm biased when it comes to Ronda Rousey, so definitely. Go ahead, Holiday.
Yeah, this was fun. It was good talking about Aldo and all that stuff again. Last thing I would like to just basically end it with is that Aldo brought me the most disrespectful thing that you could do in fighting. And to me, fighting is always about the most disrespectful way that you could win. And to punch somebody in the head, like Jay-Z said, to kill somebody dead is nothing, but kill them while he's still breathing out, he's saying something. That is leg kicks. If you take somebody out with leg kicks, that is the ultimate disrespect because if you punch somebody in the head, they supposed to go out. But you beat somebody's legs so bad that they can't stand up and walk and no longer can fight. That's all I got to say. I'm in with that right there.
Word.
Okay, cool. Well, this is DC, and thank you to my guests, Holiday and TJ. So that wraps up another great Fat Boy MMA podcast. Thank you for listening. If you got a topic for us or something you want us to talk about, a particular fighter, a particular topic, please email us over at fatboymma55 at gmail.com or reach out to us on one of our social media platforms. Some of them are up, some of them are not, still to come, but you can find them over at links.fatboymma.com. All right, have a good one. Bye.
Yeah.
Peace.
That wraps up another Fat Boy MMA podcast. If you have a topic for us, please email us at fatboymma55 at gmail.com or reach out to us on social media by going to links.fatboymma.com. That's links.fatboymma.com. Thank you for listening.